Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 609th episode of the History Ghost Bump podcast. Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I'm your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we are going to be bringing everybody the haunts of Chatham, which is in Kent. So we're going across the pond. And a lot of these are forts. And then we have the Chatham Dockyard. So it has a lot of military history here and quite a few ghosts. So we're looking forward to bringing that to you.
History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Kelly, before we get into the history and haunts of Chatham, we want to welcome into the Spooktacular crew. You know, it's October. We have a whole bunch of people coming in here. We have Miranda with 2 R's, Myra, Beth, Paul, Alan with 1 L, and Crystal.
Thank you so much for joining the Spooktacular crew. And now, this month in history.
In the month of October, on the 20th, in 1632, Christopher Wren was born in East Noyle, Wiltshire. Sir Christopher Wren was an English architect, astronomer, mathematician, and physicist, and was widely considered a polymath. After the Great Fire of London in 1666, Wren was tasked with rebuilding the city. His architectural portfolio was quite impressive, having designed over 50 churches, one of which being St. Bride's Church. That particular church was the inspiration of apprentice baker Thomas Rich, who wanted to make an extravagant wedding cake. The baker imitated the design of St. Bride's Church, which continues in the traditional style of wedding cakes today. Wren's architectural designs reshaped London's skyline after the Great Fire, but he is most well known for St. Paul's Cathedral. The cathedral is considered a masterpiece of English Baroque architecture. Known by its iconic dome, it signifies London's resilience after surviving both the Great Fire of London and the Blitz in World War II. After leaving many indelible marks, primarily in London, Christopher Wren died on February 25, 1723, in his sleep and is buried in the crypt at St. Paul's Cathedral. So that's pretty cool. It's basically he designed his mausoleum.
Indeed.
And it's a big one and beautiful.
Yes. Chatham in Kent has many haunted locations, with most of them being connected to battle, war, and the military. There were 6 forts built here to protect the Chatham Dockyard from attacks, particularly by Napoleon Bonaparte. Several of those forts are haunted, and the dockyard is probably the most haunted location in Chatham. Join us for the history and hauntings of Chatham.
Chatham is located on the River Medway, making it a strategic location. The Royal Naval Dockyard was established here in 1568 by Queen Elizabeth I, but settlements date back to the Stone Age, and archaeologists have uncovered Roman occupation and Saxon settlement. With the establishment of the dockyard, large amounts of manpower were needed and a village formed that grew through the years. Protection for the dockyard was desperately needed, so Fort Amherst became the first fort built. This was followed by Fort Pitt and then Fort Luton, Fort Bridgewoods, and Fort Borstal. Then Fort Horsted was built as the final fortification. The Dutch raided the dockyard in 1667 and inflicted severe damage. When it was decided that something more substantial than Upnor Castle needed to be built, bastions and ditches were constructed, and these would be the beginnings of Fort Amherst. Official construction of that fort began in 1756. An infantry barracks was built in 1757. 2 redoubts were added in 1778, equipped with 14 42-pounders, 10 9-pounders, 8 6-pounders, and 2 4-pounder guns. Basically, those are cannons. Amherst was expanded during the Napoleonic Wars, and vast underground stores and tunnels were added with the use of convict labor from St. Mary's Island. Amherst was a formidable defense, but it was never put to the test. In 1820, much of the fort was considered obsolete, so it became a training ground. Can you imagine you spent all this time to build these forts and it's like, no, it's already obsolete by now.
So disappointing.
And what we're going to find with a lot of these forts is that they weren't needed because, the Napoleonic War is over. So, but it's kind of cool. They'll be used later on as well. Not only was it this training ground, but then people would come from all over to watch the practice sieges. So people are like, hey, grab your picnic basket. We're going to go watch, I guess, basically a movie for real.
Yeah.
Charles Dickens lived in Chatham, and he described one of these sieges in his Pickwick Papers. The fort saw some use during World War II as an air raid warning command post. In the 1980s, restoration on the fort was begun, and eventually it was open for tours and programs. And these tours include Halloween ones, which means there must be some ghosts.
Once Amherst opened to the public in 1983, ghost stories started flying. Many people have seen dark shadows that move, and this is during the daytime. The reports are almost daily occurrences. Disembodied voices are heard, many times as whispers in the ears of tourists who go running and screaming. Other times, these sounds are a child's cry or a woman weeping. The child's crying coincides with visitors having tiny handprints show up on their backs.
Which is weird. I'm like, do you mean like as if the kid was eating some chocolate and then went splat? I'm like, what do those handprints look like? Or does it just kind of look like the outline of a child's hand for just a fraction of a second or whatever?
Very unique. Poltergeist activity is experienced throughout the fort. The most seen apparition is of a soldier who hangs out on the lower gun floor. There's also another spirit that gives the soldier a run for his money, and that is a faceless male ghost seen wearing a top hat and Victorian-era coat. I mean, so what if he's faceless? I mean, a Victorian coat and top hat? How cool.
That makes it even creepier, Kelly. Yeah, I don't want a ghost looking at me without a face. I mean, I don't know how they would look at me because they wouldn't have any eyes. But when something doesn't have a face, it's just really creepy. Like when people wear costumes like that, it's creepy.
All right. One story shared came from an electrician who was doing some work in a tunnel when he heard a fire bucket fall to the ground behind him. When he turned to look at it, he watched it slide across the floor.
And I imagine he never came back to work again. He's like, you could fix your own darn lights. I'm out. Fort Pitt was begun in 1805 and would be completed in 1819. It was named for Prime Minister William Pitt, who died in 1806. The fort is shaped in an irregular polygon with bastions at each corner. 2 outlying towers were also built, and they were named Dels and Gibraltar. There were 10 18-pound cannons and other armaments. Not only did this fort not see any action, but by the time it was finished, the Napoleonic Wars had ended and there wasn't much purpose to the fort, so it was transformed into a military hospital. This would also become the headquarters of the Army Medical Department. The hospital closed in the 1920s and the buildings became a girls' grammar school. Much of the fort has been demolished, but what remains is still part of that school. The fort has a military cemetery that mainly served the hospital that lies a quarter of a mile south of the fort. Many of the burials are from both World Wars. Charles Dickens, as we said earlier, he talked about the sieges at the one fort. Well, he lived next door to this fort when he was a boy. So you can imagine he got some great ideas for his stories there. Since this is a school, there haven't been ghost hunts here. There are rumors that it is haunted, but I couldn't find anything definitive other than people said there's rumors that it's haunted.
Great. Thanks.
Well, I guess you could say that about every fort out there because, hello, why wouldn't they be?
Right. Construction on Fort Luton began in 1876 and finished in 1892. The fort was named for the Luton Valley, which it overlooks. This is the smallest of the forts and was meant to guard the landward approaches to Chatham Dockyard. This too was finished too late to be of service during the Napoleonic Wars. Thus, it had no arms and wasn't permanently manned. The fort was used for siege trials, which came to an end in 1907. Troops were housed here during World War I. After the war, it became a store. And then, in 1938, the fort became a gun operations room.
Ghost Connections was the first group to investigate the fort. They wrote, Due to the fact that it is being restored, there were only certain areas open to us on this investigation. And may I just say, these are the only people I know to have done an official investigation here. We set out with the intention of covering as much of the internal structures as possible in the evening. Session 1. The team used the furthest magazine accessible from the left tunnel to commence a seance. However, due to the noises encountered, we moved out to the tunnel to continue this experiment. Maybe you shouldn't be doing a seance. I don't know. During this, Dave moved to the main entrance end of the tunnel after Ian had walked the length of it to research noises that appeared to come from the tunnel. Session 2. The team located to the one restored casemate that is accessible. And I don't know exactly what happened there. In Session 3, the team returned to the same positions within the tunnel as at the end of Session 1, but Dave positioned himself halfway along the tunnel. Graham had the impression of someone standing between himself and Dave, opposite him within the small magazine. The team initially heard a number of noises emanate from the tunnel, which you never want to hear when you're down in a dark tunnel. As this was invisible from the team's location, Ian walked the length of the tunnel. The noises did not repeat themselves during this time as would be expected. So I think they're saying, if it was like, say, there's a rope or something that's banging against a wall or whatever, he'd probably hear that again. Ian did manage to replicate something similar to the tone of the noise heard when he stepped on a loose brick within the structure of the steps leading up to the main entrance from the tunnel itself, which makes you wonder who stepped on that brick.
Exactly.
It was observed that communication could be had between the team easily at normal volume and without much echo. This we found surprising given the normal acoustics of tunnel structures we have investigated. Dave moved towards the further end of the tunnel in order to try and establish a source for the noise, for sure by physical observation. Further noises were heard between Dave and the team within the tunnel. None of these were repeated on request, although some were close. Dave had a song come into his head later identified as Mademoiselle from Armentières. I don't know, it's French, I'm sorry, excuse me. And questioned the age of this song and its origins. The team did not know, and it was decided to research this later. Dean had thoughts of a hot air balloon crashing and described it as red and white striped, so I don't know if they are sensitive and get impressions. He did not tell us about this until the break. Later recordings of this session would reveal voices unheard by the team at the time, and one which clearly says, "Hello, Dean."
Wow.
So, somebody knew their names, apparently. Very interesting.
Fort Bridgewoods became another in the circle of forts protecting the dockyard, and this was a landward approach. Construction began in 1890, and this too would be finished after the threat from France was over. Imperial Germany was threatening, though. Bridgewoods was polygonal in shape with earthen walls, and there was a deep, dry moat around it, but no fixed armaments were mounted anywhere. The main defense would come from field artillery.
And when we talk about earthen walls, it's literally dug into the earth. So it's kind of cool that way. And it does make you wonder if that would preclude some of these forts to being a little bit more haunted because they are part of the earth.
Possibly.
To the left of the entrance were casemates that held bunks, and off the casemates were short tunnels leading to reservoirs and magazines. Convict labor did the construction, and a new prison was built above the nearby city of Borstal to house that workforce. And that name, Borstal, that was for the city, will now become the name of this youth correction system that they had in the city. And that's because they would build these Borstal jails. So basically, this was juvenile detention. So Borstal jail was juvenile detention, and it was named for this city in particular because this is where they built that new prison, where they got the idea for that kind of thing. So I get the feeling that a lot of their convict labor was young. During the 1907 siege operations, Bridgewoods was damaged. During the World Wars, the fort had radar installed and was used as headquarters for anti-aircraft guns. A railway connected Fort Luton, Fort Horsted, Fort Bridgewoods, and Fort Borstal to each other to facilitate construction by moving materials and men. Royal Engineers built it. Most of the fort was demolished in the 1970s. What was left is a Royal Mail depot. There are no ghost stories connected to this fort, and that could be because really most of it is completely gone at this point.
Fort Borstal had construction begun in 1875 and would be completed in 1883. This protected the southern approach to the dockyard. There were underground tunnels and secret areas, and this fort also had a dry ditch surrounding it. A loopholed wall at the rear provided extra protection. The fort was polygonal in shape. The fort got its name from the town of Borstal. Borstal was used for training during the World Wars, and AA gunners were placed here and remained until 1957.
And that's just a shortened way of saying anti-aircraft.
The fort was sold in 1990 with plans to restore it and open it as a tourist attraction, but those plans fell through. Today it's being refurbished into a winery, and occasional tours are offered. I did not expect that. It really looks nice with what has been done inside. The entrance hall has wood and white walls with a black and white tiled floor. This fort also has no ghost stories associated with it.
But I have a feeling once people start visiting this winery, maybe we'll get more of those. And here's a picture of that hallway. This place looks really cool. They have been refurbishing it really nicely. You would never know that this had been, an old fort in the Victorian era. Fort Horsted is located south of Chatham, Kent. The fort is named for the nearby Horsted Valley, which was named for the 5th century warrior Horsa. He and his brother Hengist are considered the first leaders of the Anglo-Saxon settlers that came to England. They are attributed with founding Kent. Horsa died in battle in 455. Hengist ruled as king over Kent from 455 to 488, and it is believed the character Beowulf is based on him.
Oh, wow.
Did you ever have to read that when you were in school?
Indeed.
Yeah. Archaeologists have found artifacts from the Anglo-Saxon time, particularly helmets and spearheads. This fort never experienced any direct battle action, but it is believed that the land underneath it was a battlefield at one time, more than likely connected to this time of the Anglo-Saxons. There were more than likely some warriors buried on the land. Construction on Fort Horsted started in 1879 and lasted for 10 years. Forced labor did the work and was completed in 1889. They came from the newly built Borstal Prison, known today as HM Prison Rochester. And it could be Roster too. I'm not sure how you guys say it over there. Horsted was a land fort in the shape of a 6-sided arrowhead, with each flank protected by machine guns. There are an extensive network of tunnels beneath the fort. In 1902, Horsted was armed with 7 mounted machine guns. Anti-aircraft guns were mounted at the fort during World War II. The fort was deserted in the 1990s and sat derelict. Today, the fort is mainly a business park that hosts tours, so you can tour it. They do allow investigations there. There have been several people that have investigated there. And as you probably got a feeling, all of these forts are very similar in shape in the time period that they were built, in the fact that none of them really got to see much action, at least not for the purpose that they were built for, which was to protect the dockyard. Most of them saw action during the World Wars when they had the anti-aircraft guns on them. So it's all very, very similar here. It just amazes me that you would go to all the trouble to make these 6 forts, and then it was like, for what?
Took them too long.
But we'll talk about the dockyard in just a moment, and you'll see why it was so important for them to protect it at all costs.
People have claimed for decades that they feel uneasy at the fort. People claim to hear disembodied whispers and screams, and shadow figures have been seen. Ghost Adventures visited in 2012, and they wrangled some locals into conducting a seance to see if they could agitate some spirits.
Of course.
Not surprised. The group did hear audible screams and booming sounds. They captured EVPs that said, "They're coming," and "They're not doing this." The spirit box had, "Hey Carl, we can play," "Me," and "Back here, come through." Carl was someone who joined them on the hunt. The "back here" was a female voice in an English accent.
So good. I like it when that happens, particular to where you are. That's what you would expect to hear.
Indeed. The group also saw a dark shadow, had the EMF device going off, and there was an unexplained light anomaly in a room where Carl and Aaron were investigating. Zach wore this jacket that was supposed to be sensitive to rises in temperature, and it did light up red right after the group heard a disembodied voice.
I don't know if I buy into the
sensitive jacket?
Yeah. I mean, what is it a FLIR? Because
FLIR.
FLIR cameras?
Yeah.
Is it a FLIR jacket? I don't know. It seemed kind of weird to me. The Maidstone Ghost Hunters offer ghost tours, and they investigated in November of 2022 with a group of people. They went down into the underground tunnels, which were pitch black and only had their flashlights to see their way, or as they called them, torches. The group heard a shuffling noise down a dark alleyway. No. Nope. Not down there in the tunnels when it's pitch black. Colin Waterman was among the group, and he told Kent Live, "We did a Ouija board session, and we were calling out to see if there were any spirits in the area, and a little child came through on the board. They spell out the letters. We said, 'Are you a little boy?' And it went to yes. He said that he died there when he was a little boy. Colin snapped a bunch of pictures during the investigation, and when he went home, he discovered a face in one of the pictures. He said, 'I skipped past the photo and went, hang on a minute,' and I zoomed in, lightened it up, and it came up as a little face. I've got a few in the past, but nothing as clear as that. You get the little goose pimples to think I was actually standing there and that was looking down at us and we didn't see it. I was straight on to the crew members. They were like, 'Oh my God, I can't believe it. What a great photo.' And of course, I have that here for you. I'm going to show you first. Here we have the distant one. So this is the original picture that he took. When I look at it, it just kind of looks like pareidolia to me, but it is a dark tunnel with kind of a little light anomaly down there or something that's lighter in color. And then here we have it zoomed in. And yes, it does look like a little face zoomed in. But again, is it just pareidolia? I don't know.
The group, Search into the Supernatural, shared about a ghost hunt they hosted on September 13th, 2025 on Facebook, writing, "As the evening progressed, we truly began to connect with the spirits of the fort, leading to some fascinating captures on our cameras. One highlight was when a gentleman in what appeared to be a military uniform was caught on a guest camera in the exact same spot where we've previously encountered him. He certainly isn't shy about making his presence known."
Yeah, apparently he shows up a lot there. And what I love about this was literally a little over a month ago that they were doing that.
Yeah.
They captured that. Pretty recent.
Very cool.
Chatham Dockyard is probably the most haunted location in Chatham. And why wouldn't it be? Because it's got a ton of buildings here. So there's a lot of opportunity for hauntings. The dockyard started as a center for wooden shipbuilding in 1567 and grew into a center for the new Iron Navy. The initial facility was below Chatham Church and had a wharf, storehouses, slips, and was home to the warship Merlin, which was a pinnace of 10 guns built in 1579. The Merlin would fight against the Spanish Armada in 1588. This Tudor dockyard no longer exists, and the present Chatham Dockyard would move to its location in 1618. The Navy needed dry docks, and the former dockyard just didn't have the room for that. So this dockyard had the dry docks and new storehouses, slips, and housing for senior dockyard officers. The first action for ships coming from the dockyard would be trade wars with the Dutch. These battles would be fought in the English Channel and North Sea. The late 1600s brought conflict with France and Spain as Britain joined forces with Holland under William and Mary. So they were fighting each other, and then they were teammates. It was at this time that the Chatham Dockyards would become the principal shipbuilding yard. 2 mast ponds were added, and this made it possible to make masts from fir logs. And I needed to know more, because you know me, Kelly. So I'm like, okay, how do we go about doing this? Because one of the parts of this process requires what they called seasoning the masts underwater. And I'm like, what? What is that all about? So this was a traditional shipbuilding method, also referred to as pickling, and entailed putting freshly cut logs underwater, and that's salt water, for at least a year to leach out the sap and resins, and this would keep the wood from decaying. A lengthy air drying process would finish this whole deal, and then the mast would be ready to be put on a boat. So building a wooden boat took a long time because you had to cure the wood basically and then put it all together.
Wow. Very impressive. Britain's oldest surviving intact naval building is here, and this is the Commissioner's House, which was built in 1704. Many other buildings would join it, such as the Officers' Terrace, Clock Tower Building, Hemp House, and Main Gate Dockyard Wall. There are around 100 buildings on the property today. The largest and finest ship built up until 1765 came out of this dockyard, and that was the HMS Victory. The Battle of Trafalgar would end Napoleon's struggle to invade Britain, and the HMS Victory was the flagship during that battle. This signified to the world that Britain had the greatest navy and made it the global superpower of the early 1800s.
With the Industrial Revolution came new ironworking facilities. These were constructed in 1808, and one of Britain's first steam-powered sawmills was added in 1814. Another dry dock would be finished in 1820. There were more admirals' offices added and a Royal Dockyard church as well. You got to have a church. I mean, basically, it sounds to me like they were building a little city here of the dockyard. The middle of the 19th century would see the biggest period of construction for the dockyard. Steam and iron would be the focus, and the first steam vessel was launched in 1832. This was the paddle sloop Phoenix. Any timber-holed sailing ships had auxiliary steam engines added to them, and this made up Britain's Black Battle Fleet that would fight during the Crimean War. The first iron-built ship would be the Achilles. Did it have a bad heel? Did it have a bad keel? And it was finished in 1863. The dockyard would struggle with these new iron ships because there were no longer constraints on size. Wooden vessels could only be built so big, Kelly. I mean, the wood's only so long, you can only curve it so much, you can only attach so much. So it's like, this is as big as we can make them, but iron ships could be massive, and the dockyard was just too small to handle this. So they built this dockyard extension, and it was mostly used for repairs because they still were having a hard time building ships there. The last battleship constructed at the dockyard was in 1905, and this was the HMS Africa. The HMS Dreadnought, and we've had that come up many times, would change how battleships were constructed, and it was built at the Portsmouth dockyard in 1906. So you can see now they're moving all of the bigger ships over to this other dockyard. That ended Chatham's shipbuilding, at least of battleships. Submarines, however, could be made at Chatham, and this became the dockyard's new focus. So it's not like, oh, it's all over for you. You can't do battleships. They get to do really cool thing, submarines. 57 submarines would be built here from 1908 to 1960. The dockyard had plenty of work during the World Wars because, of course, they did repairs, and the dead were honored here as well. There is a Chatham Naval Memorial at the dockyard to honor 8,000 men of the Chatham Division who lost their lives during World War I. This is above the historic dockyard. There are many barracks here, including the Infantry Barracks, Marine Barracks, Artillery Engineer Barracks, St. Mary's Barracks, and Naval Barracks. The dockyard closed in 1984. Most buildings are still standing. Some are used by the universities at Medway, and others are museums. 47 of these buildings are scheduled ancient monuments.
Wow. Charles Dickens wrote of the dockyard in 1861, 1,200 men are working at her now. 1,200 men working on stages over her sides, over her bows, over her sterns, under her keel, between her decks, down in her hold, within her and without, crawling and creeping into the finest curves of her lines, wherever it is possible for men to twist. 1,200 hammerers, measurers, caulkers, armorers, forgers, smiths, shipwrights, 1,200 dingers, clashers, dongers, rattlers, clinkers, bangers, bangers, bangers. There was a time when the dockyard employed 10,000 men.
Wow. And I love the way that he wrote that all out. And I'm impressed, Kelly. You got that all out. No problem. It's a lot of different little dingers, clashers, dongers. And it's like, what are they all doing over there? Yeah, so 10,000 men, and there were about 100 buildings here. So, like I said, it was basically a small city.
Quite the place.
The Chatham Dockyard offers ghost tours, and people have had a lot of paranormal experiences. The main haunted locations include the Commissioner's House, the Ropery, and the Joiner's Workshop. As we said earlier, the Commissioner's House is the oldest structure here. There is a legend that claims a young woman committed suicide in the house by hanging herself from the back stairs after hearing her lover had been killed in battle, and she now haunts it. She may be the Gray Lady who wanders the staircase and landing. Former commissioners are here too. One of the spirits encountered is thought to belong to Peter Pett. He was the commissioner at Chatham Dockyard from 1647 to 1667. The Dutch attacked the Medway in 1667, and to Pett's shame, he decided to protect his own property before protecting the king's. Not a very good idea, especially if you're in charge of the dockyard. This led to the worst defeat the British Navy ever experienced in history, period. Not up until that point. That is in their history.
Wow.
So, what do you think happened to Commissioner Pett?
To the Tower of London you go!
That's exactly what happened. He got thrown in there for punishment. There was no forgiveness for him.
The Sail and Color Loft is another haunted building. Workers in the building reported seeing a woman wearing a long flowing dress that usually has the scent of lavender around her. Many of the machinists would claim to be touched on their shoulders by something they couldn't see. One of the former female overseers may be here, and she is a mean one who bullies. She pushes people, and when she appears, she has no feet and hovers.
Ooh, that's kind of creepy, and I wonder why she doesn't have any feet. Could it be, the legend that people sometimes had to have their feet cut off so they could fit in the coffin? Is that why?
Could be, or maybe the floors are higher now than what they used to be.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that they had female overseers.
Definitely.
Miles and miles of rope were made at the dockyard over 400 years.
That hemp stuff that people like to smoke?
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend smoking this stuff.
Oh, yeah, probably not.
It probably won't get you high. It might set you on fire, but the ropery is one of only 4 remaining original Royal Navy rope yards still in operation. It's a really cool looking building. I'll put a picture up here of it. It was built in 1728 and expanded in 1812. The building is said to be haunted by mischievous young ghosts who had been bobbin boys. So I'm thinking, if you've got these young ghosts that were bobbin boys, how did they pass away? Did we have some industrial accidents or something?
Maybe.
Ghostly women who were seen in the spinning rooms. There's an area near the ropery where a young drummer boy was murdered and decapitated. He is seen as a headless ghost walking around. This area also has the sound of horses' hooves heard at night. The joiner's shop is today a modern business center, but was built in 1790. It originally made tree nails, but then was used by the yard's joiners. And a little fun fact, I love this, Kelly. I had no idea. Do you know how the Resolute desk got its name?
I do not.
So for those of you who don't know, you probably do if you're American. The Resolute desk, many U.S. presidents have used that in the Oval Office. It's not always in there because the president gets to have his choice of what desk he wants, but pretty much most presidents use it because it is a gorgeous desk. And I mean, hello, just use the Resolute desk. That's what all the really cool presidents do. So anyway, this is the desk that's in the Oval Office. It was made here at the Chatham Dockyard by the joiners, and they made it from the timbers of the HMS Resolute, and that is why it has that name.
Wow.
So it was made from a battleship. Isn't that cool?
Very cool.
The joiner shop is haunted by dark spirits. Shadow figures are seen wandering around, and people feel like something is oppressing them and that they aren't welcome. Visitors have been dragged from chairs. So hopefully our presidents don't have anything weird going on in the Oval Office with this desk.
The show Most Haunted investigated during season 4, and Yvette became so scared she couldn't move. Derek seemed to be possessed by an evil spirit. The group heard disembodied footsteps and shuffling. Nick Richmond was a duty manager who led ghost tours at the time, and he told Most Haunted, "We've been doing ghost walks around the dockyard now for about 4 years. We've experienced strange apparitions. People in the group have said that they've seen people as we've been talking. In the commissioner's house itself, I've been involved in 2 ghost watches, and we know that we have a presence of a woman who is affectionately known as Mary, who took her own life in the house, and she's come to me on numerous occasions. I'm always aware of her presence."
Tour guide Samantha Hartley told Most Haunted about an experience she had in the joiner shop. "I've actually been pushed over. I've been rocked backwards and forwards as well, which is quite strange. The most common thing that happens is the cold spots, though. You manage to walk into a room, you'll feel the temperature drop dramatically, which is quite strange." Derek Akora was the medium for the show, and I guess he's passed now. I don't know that much about Most Haunted, but he's passed away at some point here. And he said in the commissioner's house, "I'm aware of at times a woman's energies. And it's not just here, but at this moment, I'm picking up on the residual, a woman's energies moving between these 2 rooms. And this woman, come on, Sam, you give her that back to me again." So I don't know if there's like a fighting or something going on here. This woman, if we can, I know it might sound awkward. If we go into that next room, I'll pick up the energy stronger. I feel, yes. It's even more evident in this atmosphere here in this room because it's like the psychic antenna, so to speak. It's activated here in this energy. So she would spend a lot more time in this room, but she moves about. She doesn't come through the doors. She just goes through the wall. Well, that's how you know she's a ghost for sure. And this woman, her attitude, her personality is very bossy. And she was used to, I feel, it's only a feeling at the moment because she's not active here in this room yet, but I know she moves about this house. Absolutely. She's here all the time, and she's not just in visitation. I feel she's not a bad person, by the way, a good person. So he's definitely picking up here in the commissioner's house. They think they have these two women. There might be the one who is the young woman who killed herself, and then there might be this other woman who's in there, and all they ever do is reference it as the Gray Lady. So they're not sure which one is the Gray Lady, or maybe they both are the Gray Lady. Because again, we don't know how spirits manifest, what kind of colors they can put off. Maybe it's just that they can't manifest all the colors. Who knows?
All of these locations have a long history in Chatham. Britain wouldn't have the Navy it does today without the Chatham Dockyards and the forts that protected it. Are these locations haunted? That
is for you to decide. Well, lots of cool stuff to check out. I would love, if we ever were to get over there, to see the Chatham Dockyard, because there's so much to see there and so much history. And I have never really gone somewhere where they get into the process of shipbuilding. We've gone to a lot of museums that have old battleships, and whether they're the wooden ones or the iron ones, we've seen all of that. But we've never really gotten to experience what it's like to be in a place where they were building these ships, especially sailing ships, where they would have these massive masts and sails, and just thinking about the people having to make those kinds of things to make them seaworthy and battle-worthy and all that good stuff. Just great, great stuff. And how fun. They're haunted too, maybe.
Yep.
We'd love to have you check out our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to comment to us, you can either do that at any of our social media or at our email address, historygoesbump@gmail.com. Want to thank you for joining us for this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now.
Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
Dispatches from the Grave Digger.
We want to welcome back into the cemetery Alan Belomo. We are going to be putting you into a garden crypt.
Thank you so much for supporting History Goes Bump.
We did a word.
A word?
See what happened? I don't want to use Ouija boards, so I can't even say it. Any timber-hulled sailing ships had auxiliary steam engines added to them, and this made up Britain's black battle feet. Battle feet? They had battle feet.
It sounds like something you get from walking around in mud or something.
Gangrene, who knows?
Yeah.
There are many barracks?
Barracks. I need to go get back to my barrack because I need a nap. One of the four more.
There's 4 more of them.
In the commissioner's house itself, I've been involved in 2 ghost watches, and we know that we have a presence of a woman who is affectionately known as Mary, who took her own life in the house, and she's come on to me.
Kelly, not come on to him, come to him. Wow, that is one fresh ghost.
That's one frisky spirit.
He was so excited to tell everybody. We call her affectionately Mary because, she comes on to me all the time.
Nod, wink, wink.
Sure she
Say
does,
no more,
buddy.
say no more.
Is that what you tell your wife?